Hey guys, my name is Chris and I just want to say welcome to Mosaic. And we are so glad you're watching with us today and we can't wait to dive in this week's episode with you. And I want to challenge you with two things today. The first is, if you finish this episode and you think, you know what? I would love to watch more of this. Well, all you have to do is head to www.mosaic.show where you can find all of our previous episodes and interviews on topics like purity, loneliness, relationships, reconciliation, and tons more. And we have a lot of content that is designed to help you navigate through life no matter what you're walking through. The second thing is, before you watch any further, all I need you to do is hit the like and share button on this video. See, we would love to see Mosaic continue to reach as many people as possible, and you can become a part of that by simply hitting the share button and let your friends and family know that you're watching with us. And in just a second, our lead pastor Arthur is going to teach us about how to navigate through the hard times in life. So sit back and let's kick off this week's Mosaic episode.
Your Honor, I object. Your Honor, whoa, right here. Your Honor, me, I object. I've got something to say. I don't like what's going on. I think you should do things differently. Have you ever been in court and wanting to stand up before the judge and say, Your Honor, I object, and not have him say anything back to you? Have you ever wanted to do that? I've been in court a couple times, and honestly, I didn't want to say that because I was too scared. I was afraid I was already in too much trouble, and I didn't want to get in any more trouble, and so it never really crossed my mind. But when I'm watching TV shows or movies, sometimes I sit there and go, somebody should object to this. Stand up and say, I object, right? But it doesn't necessarily always work out to be a good idea to do that. But that's what's going on with what we're talking about today. Because here's the thing, sometimes it seems as though God is just not fair. Like, God, look, would you fix this? If you would just do what I need you to do, everything would be better, right? Because here's what happens with a lot of us, right? Think of it this way. Your life starts out right here, and that's where you are. And maybe through a series of circumstances, broken relationships, disappointment, discouragement. It didn't work this way for everybody, but for a lot of people, what happens is your life starts just going kind of downhill. And it gets to a point where a lot of people just bottom out and they realize, I can't do this on my own. I just cannot get this accomplished on my own. I need some help. And so they turn to God in that moment and say, God, would you help me? Would you lift me out of that pit? And God does what he says he's going to do. He says, yes, I'll rescue you. And so what happens is your life begins to get a little bit better, and you keep walking with the Lord, and things keep getting better. And instead of being in this pit, you find yourself, climbing up a little bit, and there's some elevation in your life, right? And then something happens, and you're like, where did this come from? God, I was with you, I was trusting you, and your life starts going down this way a little bit. And then you get down here in this area right here, and there's a dip there, so I'm like, God, I'm almost feel like I'm bottoming out again. Where are you? This is not fair. I was trusting you. I was walking with you. I was doing things with you. And the really great news is you don't have to stay in the dip. You don't have to stay right here, but you can choose to advance, and you'll see at some point that God will move your life back up, elevating in a great direction. Or you can choose to go back over here the way things used to be and retreat, and things won't be as good as they used to be. So let me read this passage of scripture to you from Habakkuk chapter 2. Now Habakkuk is this tiny little book in the Old Testament. It's just 3 chapters long. It's prophecy, so it's a little bit weird. It's a little bit different. But what's going on? This guy named Habakkuk, his name means wrestle. And so he is wrestling with God about what's going on in his life. Like, God, why am I here in the dip? I mean, he's a prophet. His name's in the Bible. There aren't very many people who get their names in the Bible. He's somebody pretty substantial. God, why am I down here in this dip? I thought everything was always going to be great for me. Why is things kind of different right now? And why are we talking about this? because everybody has moments when things are not going the way that you hope they would with your family or at work or at school, and you're like, God, what is going on? A relationship falls apart that you were counting on. An employee that you work with stabs you in the back. There's all kind of things that happen, and we're like, God, why are you letting this happen? And that's what Habakkuk says in chapter 2. He says this: how long, Lord, must I call for help, but you do not listen? Have you ever done that? Have you ever been saying, God, would you just help me? God, I'm over here. God, I keep asking and asking and asking, and nothing is happening. How long, oh Lord, must I ask for help, he says. And he goes on and says this. He says, or how many times do I cry out to you violence, but you do not save? Why do you make me look at injustice? Why do you tolerate wrongdoing? You know, that question people have been asking for thousands of years. If God is a good God, why does he allow wrongdoing to go on in the world? Why does he allow somebody to hurt me? Why does that happen? And Habakkuk has these same kind of questions, all right? So let's keep reading. He says, destruction and violence are before me. There is strife and conflict abounds. Therefore the law is paralyzed and justice never prevails. The wicked hem in the righteous, so that justice is perverted. And so over and over and over again, he's saying, God, would just look, I'm in here in this dip, I'm stuck, I'm in this low place in my life, would you help me? So what do we do when we're in this low point in our life and we're not sure what's going on and when it's going to happen and when things are going to be better? What do we do? 3 things, all right? 3 things we're going to talk about today about what we can do. Number 1, stop and listen. Stop and listen to God. When you're in the dip and you feel like you're stuck and you can't get anywhere, stop and listen. Listen to who, Arthur? Listen to God. You're his child. He loves you. He wants the very best for you. And so how does God speak to people? Well, you know, to some people, God speaks audibly. Now, I don't know that that's ever happened to me, that I have heard him like through the speaker at the drive-thru at Wendy's. I don't know if I've ever heard him speaking in that kind of way to me in a loud, audible voice, but I believe he does that for people. I believe that happens. Another way that God speaks to his people is through his word. You know, you want to know what God has to tell you, what you should do in a situation? You open the Bible and you read and say, God, what should I do in this situation? And if we would just do what the Bible says, we wouldn't have to worry about, hey, what do I do next? That would take care of everything that goes on in our lives if we would just do what the Bible says. Another way that God speaks to us is through people. It's through other people in our lives. Sometimes they will offer you wise counsel. They'll listen. They'll say, well, this is what I know. Maybe they offer you something from experience. But God speaks to us through other people. God also speaks to us through circumstances. Sometimes he's trying to get our attention, and the best way to get our attention is through circumstances, with struggles, with difficulties, with trials, with things that we weren't expecting to happen. And he gets our attention, and we lean in and go, God, what are you trying to show me in this moment? Another thing the way that God speaks to us is through creation. You know, I believe that you can look in your backyard and you see the trees moving in the wind, and you say, there is a majestic God that made that happen. You know, one of the great things for me is I love going to the beach. I stand at the beach and the ocean comes and it stops right there. And I look and I can, as far as I can see, there's ocean. And I'm like, God made this. And I start realizing how big he is, and he starts speaking peace to me. And I think, you know what? He told the ocean to stop right here. I don't have it in me to say, hey, ocean, stop. But he does. And so sometimes he speaks to us through his creation as well. The second thing I would tell you is that when you're in the dip and you're learning things that God is showing you while you're in the dip, what I would tell you to do is write those things down. Write those things down that he tells you and shows you and teaches you while you're in this low place in your life. So first thing, stop and listen to him. Second thing, write what he shows you, because here's the thing, you're going to want to remember that. Because this is probably not the only low point you're ever going to have in your life. I heard a preacher say a long time ago that life is a series of storms, that we're either going into a storm, we're in the middle of a storm, or we're coming out of a storm. And so you're going to have another storm, another low place that's going to happen at some point in your life. And you want to remember, hey, this is what God taught me the last time I went through something difficult. You want to remember that, and you're going to remember it the best by writing it down. When my wife says, hey, can you stop by the store and pick up a couple of things from the grocery store? Sometimes it's just 2 things, and I'll go in there, and if I don't write it down, you know what? I'll forget one of them. and I have to call her and say, I think there was something else I was supposed to get. What was it? So just like you remember the little things like a grocery list or the things you need to accomplish on your task list the next day, we want to write down the things that God has taught us so that we remember those things. Number 3, wait. Wait, 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 wait. So number 1, stop and listen. Number 2, write what God shows you. Number 3, wait. Because here's what we want to do. Like, I don't like this low place. I want to get out of it. It's uncomfortable. And so we want to retreat and run back, or we want to advance. And of course, I've talked a lot about we need to advance and say, God, I'm trusting you and I'm going to keep moving forward. But we wait, even when things look impossible and we want to do something in a hurry, wait. You know, one of my favorite stories in the Bible, there's this guy named Moses. Maybe you've heard of him. One of the greatest leaders, I think, in all of history. And he's leading about 1 million slaves who happen to be future Israelites. He's leading them out of Egypt because they've been slaves for 400 years. And he leads them out, and they're going to go to the promised land. And he's leading them out, and Pharaoh's army comes running after him. And so there's women, there's children, there's babies, there's men, there's old people, young people. It's this whole nation of people on the move. And they get to the edge of the Red Sea, and they're like, well, what are we supposed to do? We can't go back because Pharaoh's army is behind us. And so God puts up this wall of fire between them and Pharaoh's army, but you can't just sit there and say, be trapped between a wall of fire and between the Red Sea for forever. And so here's what Moses does. He stops and he gets out in front of everybody. He says, hang on a minute. We're going to see what God has to say. And he says, God, what do you want me to do? God speaks to him. God says, part the water. And Moses probably goes, excuse me? Do what? Yeah, put your hands up, part the water, and everybody's going to walk across on dry ground. And Moses is going, I don't think we can do that. Now, his assistant is right there beside him, Joshua. Maybe he leans over to Joshua and is talking and says, hey, God wants me to part the water. And Joshua says, what does that mean? He says, I don't know. He says, I'm just going to do what God says that we should do. It turns out that Moses writes all this down so we would know it, right? But they decide they're not going to do anything until God tells them what to do and shows them a way out. They waited. We wait, we wait, we wait, we wait. And so sure enough, what happens? He puts his hands up, says, part the water. God parts the water. 1 million people walk through on dry land through the middle of the Red Sea. The wall of flame goes down. Pharaoh's army comes chasing after them. God releases the water that's piled up. Pharaoh's army is destroyed. And so they go from being in the dip to starting to advance and seeing what God has got in store for them next. At the very end of chapter 2 of Habakkuk, he says these 3 words, and I think they're really important. He says, after a list of all kinds of complaints and all kinds of things, he stops for a minute, realizes what he's been doing. He's just complain. He stops and he waits on the Lord, and he says, but the Lord. The full verse says, but the Lord is in his holy temple. But it says, but the Lord. So no matter what's going on, God has not forgotten you. God has not abandoned you, not run away from you. He is with you. And if you find yourself in a low place today or next week or next month or next year, remember, God is with you. He has not forsaken you or forgotten you. He's with you, and he's in charge. Listen to what he tells you. Write down what he tells you so that you remember it, and wait on him because he will see you through it. He always does.
We hope you're enjoying watching along this week. I just wanted to stop and tell you about an amazing opportunity that we have for you. See, starting this Sunday, we are kicking off our Reach More offering campaign. And what this is from this Sunday through Easter Sunday, outside of our regular tithes and giving, we are asking our church family to take their generosity to the next level and to give towards our local and global missions partners. And your generosity has already made it possible for the gospel to be preached all over the world and for lives to be touched all around. And we cannot wait to see what God has in store for this year. So thank you for partnering with us. Thank you for being a generous church, and thank you for joining with us as we make it our mission to empower mission work. Now, don't go anywhere because we're about to get right back into this week's episode.
Hi, my name is Caitlin Crane, and I run a nonprofit called Just One. And at Just One, we work to rescue and protect children from sex trafficking and exploitation. Statistics estimate that there are over 10 million kids around the world today that are trapped in some form of trafficking or slavery. And we are committed to fighting on behalf of those children. And what that looks like internationally is we run a safe house for girls who have been rescued from different forms of exploitation and slavery. These girls are ages 6 to 20. They are all enrolled in private school, one of the top ranking private schools in the country. And in our safe house, we provide for all of their needs. That's therapy, food, clothing, medical care. And after they graduate from private school, they're given the chance to go to college or vocational school so they can continue their education. Ultimately, our goal is to give them the chance to live up to their full potential and to live lives as healthy and stable adults. We also work here locally, and we do prevention education. See, trafficking, exploitation is a cycle, and to start breaking that cycle, we have to start stopping it before it even starts. The way that we do that is we go into schools and we talk to youth on how to protect themselves from the tactics of predators and traffickers. We also talk to adults and parents on how to protect the youth and children in their life from those dangers. So I'd love to give you guys an update from recently in Kenya. In November, we went and saw our girls, visited our safe house. It was a really special trip because we hadn't been in a while. Just got to spend time getting to know each of these girls, and their personalities are all across the board, from super shy to very outgoing and lively, and just love each one of those girls. One of my favorite stories is we took them shopping. Our donors were so generous, and people like you who are supporting, and Southcrest that is supporting our work, gave them the chance to go shopping and get new clothes. And a few days after we went shopping, some of the girls were wearing their clothes and they still had the tags on. And I asked them, I was like, why don't we take the tag off? And they're like, no. And I said, well, like, why not? What's wrong? And they said, well, we want people to know that these are new clothes because we've never had the chance to get new clothes before. And it was kind of funny at first, and then I just realized like what that meant to those girls. Another thing I think of is when we went to some of the slums, and it was a very impactful morning for me. Got to see this is where some of these girls were rescued from. Many of them came from backgrounds from families where, for instance, their mother was sold and forced into a work that caused her to contract AIDS at a very young age and died at age 17 after already having three daughters. And these 3 girls we rescued, if we had not rescued them, they would have been forced into the same thing their mom was, and likely would not be alive today. And so that is just one example of how our donors or supporters are making it possible to impact the lives of these girls and change their futures. So we're very thankful and excited to continue to do that on behalf of the lives of children all around the world.
Every time I try to make it on my own, every time I try to stand, I start to fall. And all those lonely roads that I have traveled on, there was Jesus. When the life I built came crashing to the ground, when the friends I had were nowhere to be found, I couldn't see it then, but I can see it now. There was Jesus. In the waiting, in the searching, in the healing and the hurting, like a blessing buried in the broken pieces. Every minute, every moment, where I've been and where I'm going, even when I didn't know, I couldn't see it, there was Jesus. For this man who needs a there was Jesus.
There was Jesus.
And the waiting, and the searching, and the healing, and the hurting, like a blessing buried in the broken pieces. Every minute, every moment, where I've been and where I'm going, even when I didn't know it, I couldn't see it. There was Jesus on the mountains, in the valleys,
There was Jesus.
in the shadows of the alleys,
There was Jesus.
in the fire, in the flood,
There was Jesus.
always is and always was. No one ever walked alone. In the waiting, in the searching, in the healing, and the hurting, like a blessing buried in the broken pieces. Every minute, every moment, where I've been and where I'm going, even when I didn't know it, I couldn't see it. There was Jesus. There was Jesus.
There was Jesus. There was Jesus.
Well, that wraps up this episode. Thank you so much for watching along with us. We hope that you are both encouraged and empowered to live the life that God has called you to. And we would love to hear from you this week. If you have any questions about today's episode, if you've made a decision this week, or if you just even need prayer, all you have to do is shoot us an email at hello@southcrest.church, and we would love to connect with you and help you in any way that we possibly can. And as we close out today, don't forget to share this episode on social media so that we can continue to reach new people together. So thank you again for watching Mosaic, and we'll see you next week.